All right, today we're diving into a real economic puzzle, one that's been a headache for France for decades. It's super high unemployment. We're going to break down the big, ambitious reforms they tried, which makes for a perfect case study on how economic theory gets a serious reality check. Okay, let's get right into it. This chart here, it tells the whole story of the problem President Macron walked into. See that blue line for France? For years, it's just been stuck up there, floating stubbornly above Germany, the UK, you name it. While other countries were getting back on their feet, France's unemployment rate just wasn't budging. And that's a huge red flag that this wasn't just a temporary blip. It was a deep structural issue. And that really sets up the big questions for this whole explainer. What was really causing this long-term unemployment? And were the big, sweeping reforms that the government brought in actually the right medicine for the job? So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the puzzle itself. Then, we'll diagnose what was actually going on in the economy. After that, we'll dig into the two-part solution they came up with, see how well it actually worked, and then, wrap it all up with the key economic takeaways you'll want to remember. Right. So the main thing to get here is that France's high unemployment wasn't just about the ups and downs of the economy. It wasn't just a recession thing. No, this was a sticky, persistent problem that was there even when the economy, in general, was doing all right. So what's the official diagnosis? Well, economists call this structural unemployment. And for anyone studying IB economics, this is a term you absolutely have to know. It means the issue isn't a simple lack of jobs. The problem is baked into the very structure of the job market itself. And here's what that really means. Structural unemployment is all about a mismatch. You've got workers with one set of skills and employers who are looking for a totally different set. Now, this problem can get way, way worse because of something called labor market rigidities, which is just a fancy way of saying there are a bunch of rules and regulations that make it really hard or expensive for companies to hire. And in France, they had both of these problems in a big way. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because the problem had two very different sides. On the left, you see the rigidities. Think complex labor laws, really high cost to let an employee go. All this stuff made companies, especially the smaller ones, really hesitant to hire anyone permanently. It was just too risky. And then on the right, you have the skills mismatch. Even when companies wanted to hire, they couldn't find people with the right training. This led to an absolutely staggering situation: 400,000 jobs sitting empty. And this chart just shows that skills mismatch perfectly. It tracks the number of manufacturing companies saying that a lack of skilled workers was actually holding back their business. And just look at how that number shoots up after 2016. So you end up with this crazy paradox: tons of people looking for work and tons of jobs looking for people. That right there is the classic sign of structural unemployment. So, to fix this really complicated problem, Macron's government came in with a two-pronged attack. And the weapons they used were what economists call supply-side policies. The whole idea wasn't to just create more demand for stuff, but to fundamentally fix the engine of the labor market itself, to make it run smoother and more efficiently. And it is super important to understand the two different flavors of supply-side policies they used here. We have market-oriented ones and interventionist ones. Both are trying to achieve the same goal, but they come at it from completely different angles. So first up, the market-oriented policies. These were aimed right at those rigidities we were just talking about. By putting a cap on how much it costs to fire someone, they made it less risky for a company to hire them in the first place. Then they changed taxes and unemployment rules to give people more of a reason to go out and get a job. It's all about trying to let the market do its thing with fewer obstacles. Okay, second, you've got the interventionist policies. This is where the government decided to roll up its sleeves and get directly involved. We're talking about a massive 15 billion euro plan to train people who were young or had been out of work for a long time. They created specific programs like One Young Person, One Solution to give young people money and training opportunities. So yeah, this is active government spending, not just fiddling with the market rules. So that was the plan. But the real question, the one that always matters in these case studies, is, did any of it actually work? Let's take a look. Well, at first glance, the main number looks pretty impressive. By 2021, unemployment had fallen to 7.4%. I mean, that's a really big drop, down to a level they hadn't seen since way before the big financial crisis in 2008. And here's another promising sign. This chart shows that the share of people on temporary contracts actually started to go down after the new labor laws kicked in around 2018. That suggests companies were feeling a bit more confident.
enough to offer people more stable, permanent jobs, which was exactly what the reforms were supposed to do.
But, and this is a big but, good economic analysis means we have to be careful. The OECD, which is a pretty big deal in the world of economics, pointed out that it was kind of hard to say for sure that these reforms were the only reason for the drop. Other things were happening too, like the whole European economy was doing better at the time, and that could have played a big role as well. And this really gets to the heart of why structural unemployment is so tough to fix. Even after all those changes, that huge number of unfilled jobs, up to 400,000 of them, was still there. That tells you that even if you make the market more flexible, closing that fundamental gap in skills is a really, really hard thing to do. It takes time. Okay, so bearing all of that in mind, let's pull it all together and nail down the key economic takeaways from this whole case study on France. This table is pretty much the perfect summary for your notes. It lays it out so clearly. You have the problem, structural unemployment, which was caused by both rigidities and a skills mismatch. You have the policy response, a two-part supply-side strategy using both market-oriented and interventionist tools. And then, most importantly, you have the outcome. It was positive, yeah, but definitely incomplete. Unemployment went down, but those skills shortages are still a major problem. And that really leaves us with a final big picture question to think about. This case study is a fantastic example of what supply-side policies can do, but it also shows you their limits. It makes you wonder, are these kinds of policies, by themselves, really enough to fix such a deep, long-standing problem? Or do we also need to think about other huge forces, like what's happening in the global economy, or maybe even different kinds of policies altogether?